Chapter 46, Rebuilding Trust. The silence of a Sunday morning in Bern is a physical thing. It's a soft, heavy blanket woven from the sound of distant church bells and the faint, rhythmic ticking of a clock on the mantelpiece. I woke up slowly, the sunlight filtering through the lace curtains of our hotel room. It wasn't the aggressive, clinical light of the Blackwood Tower or the cold, silver light of the Herslinden Clinic. It was a warm, buttery glow that felt like a forgiveness. I stayed still for a long time, my eyes tracing the pattern of the wallpaper. For weeks, my first thought upon waking had been a calculation of risk. Is my father safe? Is the code secure? Is Alexander lying to me? Today, my first thought was simply, he's still here. I felt the heat of him beside me. Alexander was sprawled on his stomach, his arm draped over my waist, pinning me to the mattress in a way that no longer felt like a cage. His breathing was deep and even, free of the jagged edges of stress that had haunted him since New York. I reached out and ran my fingers through his hair. It was longer than it used to be, the crisp, billionaire haircut giving way to a softer, more human mess. He stirred, a low rumble of contentment vibrating in his chest, and his grip on my waist tightened. "You're thinking again," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "I'm observing," I corrected. "There's a difference." He opened one eye, the gray iris catching the morning light. "And what does the CEO of the Sterling Blackwood Foundation observe this morning?" "I observe a man who doesn't have a conference call at 8 a.m. I observe a man who didn't check his stock ticker before he said good morning." I leaned down and kissed his temple. "I observe a man I'm starting to know all over again." Alexander rolled onto his back, pulling me with him until I was lying on his chest. He looked at me with a raw, unshielded intensity. The steward was gone. The Titan was a ghost. There was just a man who had risked his life to be in this bed with me. "Rebuilding trust is harder than building an empire, Maya," he said, his voice dropping to a serious register. "I keep waiting for the alarm to go off. I keep waiting for Marcus to tell me there's a breach I have to manage." "There are no more breaches, Alexander. We gave the secrets away, remember?" "There's nothing left to steal." "I know." He reached up, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. "But the habits of 30 years don't die in a weekend. I've spent my life looking for the back door in every room. Now that the door is wide open, I don't know where to walk." "Walk with me," I whispered, "one step at a time." I leaned down and kissed him, a slow, lingering exploration of the peace we were trying to build. This was the start of the claim. Not a claim of power, but a claim of a life that belonged to us and us alone. Alexander POV. I watched Maya as she moved around the small hotel room, packing a day bag for our walk through the old city. She was wearing a simple wool dress and boots, her hair loose. She looked like the woman I had seen in my dreams, the one who wasn't burdened by my name or her father's legacy. I felt a phantom itch in my hand for my phone. I wanted to check the status of the UN Commission. I wanted to know if my mother's lawyers were filing a new motion. I wanted to be the wall between Maya and the world, but I forced myself to stay on the bed, watching her. Trust, I realized, wasn't about believing she wouldn't leave. It was about believing that I didn't have to make her stay. It was about trusting myself to be enough without the locked-in contract. "We need to talk about the Hamptons," I said. Maya stopped, a sweater halfway into her bag. She looked at me, her expression guarded. "The house. I want to sell it." She blinked in surprise. "But you love that house." "It was your sanctuary." "It was a fortress," I corrected, standing up and walking toward her. I stopped a foot away, giving her the space she had fought so hard for. "It was built by a man who was afraid of the dark, I don't want to live in a monument to my father's paranoia anymore. I want to build a house with you, somewhere with big windows and no security perimeter, somewhere the air doesn't smell like secrets." Maya's eyes softened, the sterling fire turning into a warm, inviting glow. She stepped into my space, closing the gap I had left. She placed her hands on my chest, her fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt. "You're really doing it, aren't you? You're letting it all go." "I'm trying," I admitted, "but I have a condition." "Another condition, Mr. Blackwood." She teased, her eyebrows rising. "I want us to get married, today, in the courthouse in Bern. No press, no board members, no vigil of justice statues, just a man, a woman, and a witness." Maya went still. "Today." "I've already checked the requirements. We have the immunity papers from the UN. We have the passports. We don't need a gala, Maya. We just need to draw the final line." I saw the hesitation in her eyes, and for a second the old panic flared in my gut. I wanted to negotiate. I wanted to point out the logic, the stability, the legal protection. I wanted to lock her in. But I stopped myself. I took a breath and waited. "I refuse," she said softly. The word felt like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. You refuse." "I refuse to get married in a courthouse in a city that smells like a police station," she said, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. "I spent a month being locked in by you, Alexander. If we're going to do this, I want it to be a celebration of the fact that we're free. I want to go to the lake. I want to be surrounded by the mountains. And I want my father there to walk me down the grass, not an aisle." The relief was so absolute I nearly fell. I let out a jagged laugh and pulled her into my arms, spinning her around the small room. "The lake," I said, burying my face in her neck. "The mountains, anything you want, as long as you're the one making the rules." "I like the sound of that," she whispered. Maya POV. The walk through Bern was our first taste of a life without shadows. We walked hand in hand through the Zittglog, watching the medieval clock tower strike the hour. We ate chocolate in a small shop where the owner didn't recognize Alexander as the steward. We sat on a bench overlooking the Aar River, the turquoise water rushing past like the time we were finally reclaiming. But the rebuilding wasn't just about the scenery. "Alexander," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder, "there's one more thing. The Icarus Protocol files, the ones that are still on your private server in the Hamptons." I felt his body stiffen, the ones the federal agents missed. "I know you kept them. I know you wanted a nuclear option in case the UN Commission turned on us." I pulled back to look at him. "You're still hedging, Alexander. You're still building a backdoor." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "I was trying to ensure your safety, Maya. If they try to indict you for the sovereign work, those files are the only leverage we have." "I don't want leverage. I want the truth. And the truth is, as long as those files exist, we aren't free. We're just waiting for the next war." I took his hand, my fingers tracing the gold band on his finger. "Trust me, Alexander. Trust the world we've built. Trust that the science can survive without a weapon to protect it." Alexander was silent for a long time. I watched the struggle behind his eyes, the titan fighting the man. He had spent 30 years being the smartest person in the room by ensuring he was the only one with the key. To destroy that key was to leave himself truly vulnerable. "You're right," he whispered finally. He pulled out his phone, the new, unencrypted one. He typed a command, his fingers hesitating for a fraction of a second over the enter key. "Command authorized," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "The Hamptons server is being wiped. The Icarus Protocol is dead. He dropped the phone into the river. We watched it sink into the turquoise water, a tiny splash that echoed through the silence of our lives. The last piece of the Blackwood cage was gone. How does it feel? I asked. Lighter, he said, pulling me into a kiss. And terrifying. That's how you know it's real, I replied. Alexander POV. The flight to the Lake Brintz region the next morning felt like a pilgrimage. We had picked a small, family-run inn on the shore of the lake, a place where the mountains rose straight out of the water like green giants. My father-in-law was already there, moved by a private medical transport. He was sitting on the terrace when we arrived, his eyes bright with a clarity that still felt like a miracle. Maya, he rasped, his voice stronger than it had been in years. Hi, Dad. She ran to him, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to stand between them. I didn't feel the jealousy of the first partner. I stood back, watching them, feeling a deep, quiet sense of pride. I had helped save this man. I had helped return a daughter to her father, and in doing so, I had found a family I didn't know I was allowed to have. Arthur Sterling looked at me, his gaze lingering on my flannel shirt and the lack of a tie. He gave a slow, measured nod of approval. The boy became a man, he said. I had a very good teacher, Dr. Sterling, I replied. The wedding was at sunset. There were no photographers, no security detail, no vigil of justice. Just the three of us, a local magistrate, and the sound of the water lapping against the stones. Maya was wearing a simple white silk dress she had bought in a boutique in Bern. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked herself. She looked like the goddess of the mountains, a vision of fire and light that made my heart ache. As her father walked her across the grass, his steps shaky but his head held high, I realized that this was the real claim. I wasn't claiming an asset. I wasn't securing a legacy. I was claiming a partner who had seen me at my worst and decided I was worth the effort of being my best. We stood before the magistrate, the peaks of the Alps glowing violet in the twilight. I, Alexander, take you, Maya, to be my partner in the light and the dark, I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. No more cages, no more secrets, just us. I, Maya, take you, Alexander, to be my equal, she replied, her eyes locked on mine. No more debts, no more locked in. Just love. We exchanged rings, simple bands of gold, unadorned and permanent. When the magistrate pronounced us husband and wife, I didn't kiss her like a conqueror. I kissed her like a man who had finally found his way home. Maya POV. The night of our wedding was the first night of our real lives. We stayed in a small cabin on the edge of the inn's property, a place that smelled of cedar and wood smoke. There were no monitors, no tablets, no news tickers. The world was far away, and for the first time, I didn't care if it stayed there. Alexander led me into the cabin, but he didn't rush to the bedroom. He sat me down on the rug in front of the fireplace and began to unlace my boots. It was a gesture of such profound, humble devotion that it brought tears to my eyes. "You're the boss tonight, Maya," he whispered, looking up at me. "Tell me what you want." "I want you to stop being the chief strategist for 5 minutes," I said, reaching out to cup his face. "I want you to be the man who sat on that beach in Montauk and told me he was fragile." "I'm more than fragile, Maya. I'm yours." He stood up and pulled me to my feet. He kissed me, a slow, deep, and rawly honest kiss that tasted of the future. The steamy, heat-of-act I had evolved into something deeper, a fire that didn't consume, but sustained. We moved to the bed, the moonlight reflecting off the lake and dancing across the ceiling. He touched me with a reverence that made my skin hum. He kissed the places where the world had tried to break me, his mouth a map of the apologies he no longer had to say. In the dark of the Swiss night, surrounded by the silence of the mountains, we finally found the balance. We weren't the Blackwood Sterling scandal. We weren't the Titan and the advisor. We were just Alexander and Maya. And for the first time, that was enough. As I fell asleep in his arms, his heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against my back, I realized that the rebuilding was complete. We had torn down the old world and built something new on the foundation of the truth. But as the first light of dawn began to touch the window, I saw a single, small notification on the phone I had left on the nightstand. A message from Marcus. The transition is complete. The New York office has been rebranded. And sir, there's a package for you from the fourth partner. The room went cold. The fallout wasn't over. The enemy was still there, hiding in the shadows of the rebuilding. But as I looked at Alexander, sleeping peacefully beside me, I realized that I wasn't afraid, because we weren't separate targets anymore. We were a single, unbreakable force, and whatever was in that package, we would face it together. Alexander POV, end of chapter 46. I woke up to the sound of the wind. Maya was sitting on the edge of the bed, the phone in her hand. She looked at me, and I saw the shift. The partner was back. The CEO was ready. What is it? I asked, sitting up. A message from Marcus, she said, her voice steady and clear. There's a fourth partner, Alexander, and they've just sent us a gift. I felt a surge of the old steward energy, but I didn't let it take over. I reached out and took her hand, my grip firm and grounding. Then let's go see what it is, I said. Together. We walked out of the cabin, hand in hand. The sun was rising over the lake, a brilliant, cold gold. The claim was ours. The future was waiting. And as we headed back toward the world we had rebuilt, I realized that the locked-in era had finally, truly ended. We were free, and we were finally burning together. Next chapter, chapter 47, Slow Burn Again.